Plan to Protect with Melodie Bissell, the safest podcast on the internet. My name is Joshua Bissell, and I'm the producer of this weekly podcast, where we tackle topics of abuse prevention and vulnerable sector protection. We're so thankful that you've chosen to spend your time working towards the protection of the vulnerable and safeguarding those who are in our care. We trust that this time will be beneficial to you. Thank you again for joining us for Plan to Protect with Melodie Bissell, the safest podcast on the internet. Here's Melodie.
So thanks so much again for joining us for Plan to Protect with Melodie Bissell. Last week we talked about bullying. Today we're going to talk about a topic very related to bullying, and that is a whistleblower. What is a whistleblower, and how do you put a whistleblower policy in place? Let me start off again with a case study. These are always true case studies. These actually happened. Put yourself in the position of a team member. You're a summer intern. You're working with an organization for the summer. You're working as part of a team. And as a summer teen intern, you learn that one of your team members has been in a sexual relationship with their guidance counselor from high school. What do? Here's another case study. You learn of a coworker that has been given a promotion because they've been sleeping with the boss. What about if you suspect a coworker that has been stealing thousands of dollars from the company? How do you respond? What do you do? This calls for a lot of courage and confidence and your willingness to be a whistleblower. Recently, we had the privilege of doing a policy audit for an organization. We were brought in to review policies along with a number of other management companies to review policies for an agency that was facing millions of dollars of abuse liability. The policies that were in place were strong, but we did find some gaps in the policy. One of those was that there was no whistleblower policy in place. There was no safe place for individuals within the organization, stakeholders, that could come forward and share concerns in a safe environment. Too often, historically, what had transpired is individuals had raised concerns and they were told to mind their business, or they were told to get back to work and put their heads down. Individuals felt like it was none of their business to speak forward, or that it was not going to be a safe environment, that they would be the ones that would face the problems if they spoke up and shared what they had learned. We recommend that organizations put a whistleblower policy in place. Let me give you an example of what that would look like. As a person working within an organization, you may be the first one to realize that there is something that is seriously wrong, or there's been a breach of code of conduct, or it's impacting the activity that should be delivered, or it is hurting the bottom line of the organization, or the goodwill, the vision, and the mission of the not-for-profit. However, you feel that if you speak up, you might be disloyal to a coworker, to a colleague, to teachers or parents or children. However, you are committed to the protection of children and you want to fulfill your duty of care to the organization and those that you are serving. In these circumstances, it may be easier to ignore the concern than to report what you have learned or what you suspect is happening. Organizations recognize that the decision to report a concern can be a very difficult one. Healthy organizations in the 21st century, they recognize that it is a challenge and difficult at times for individuals to speak up. If you raise a concern based on reasonable belief and in good faith, healthy organizations have an infrastructure in place for you to be able to make that report to protect yourself, to provide duty of care to the organization and those that you serve. They will provide a healthy infrastructure for you to be able to raise these concerns. That policy would be considered a whistleblower policy. What is a whistleblower? A whistleblower is a person who tells the public or someone in authority about alleged dishonesty or illegal activity occurring within the government or within a public or private organization or company. The alleged misconduct may be classified in many ways. For example, a violation of a law, a rule, a regulation, or a direct threat to the public interest and safety. It could be fraud or health or safety violations or corruption. A whistleblower may take their allegations internally, which is really the best case scenario. But if that concern is not taken seriously, a whistleblower will go public, and they have every right to do so. They will take it externally to the regulators, to law enforcement, to the CRA, to the media, or to groups concerned with the issues. It is so important for you to have a whistleblower policy within your organization so that when concerns are voiced, they're dealt with appropriately. Let me give you an example of a church where a few congregation members discover that the pastor is having an affair with a number of the congregants. They raise their concerns. They bring their concerns to the board of elders or deacons or the trustee or the council. The concerns are ignored. It's gossip. It's not true. So the whistleblowers feel that their voice is not heard. So they take it to the denomination. They take it to the licensing body. Again, it's ignored. It's tabled. It's put low on the priority. The whistleblowers continue to raise their concerns, but now they go public. They go on a podcast. They write a blog article. They go to news outlets, and they voice their stories. All of a sudden, people respond. All of a sudden, people scramble and say, what should we do? How do we handle this bad press we're getting? Having a whistleblower policy in place can address these concerns and help them from escalating. The purpose of a whistleblower policy is to make it very clear that raising your concerns, you can do so with confidence, without fear of victimization, subsequent discrimination, or any disadvantage directed towards you. The policy and procedure should apply to all staff members and all volunteers, all stakeholders within the organization. The policy aims to encourage personnel and individuals within the organization to feel confident in raising their serious concerns and to question and act on those concerns and suspicions, to provide information as to the avenues for you to report any suspicion. So what is the process for reporting your suspicions or your allegations? To ensure that you receive a response and support in a timely way so that your report is being listened to, that there is adequate process in place for addressing your concerns, to reassure you that you will be protected, that there won't be ramifications for you raising your concerns, that there won't be reprisals or victimization if you have reasonable belief that something has transpired that is either illegal, immoral, or a breach of code of conduct. The expectations for having a policy is that the report that you give will not be malicious, that there's openness and integrity and accountability in line with that commitment of holding a high standard of protection for the organization and all people at play. That the complaints and the allegations are not malicious, but that you do have a knowledge that you can share with those that are in need to know. You may suspect that someone is abusing a minor. If it is an incident of child abuse, the whistleblower policy cannot conflict with the duty to report. In Canada, it is your duty to report child abuse to child protection agencies and law enforcement. While each province and territory has its own unique legislation, the one thing that is consistent in Canada is the duty to report, that every person has a duty to report child abuse to legal authorities and child protection agencies. In the United States and in other countries, you may not have a legal duty to report, but you have an ethical duty to report, whether that be to law enforcement or to the leadership within the organization. Please report child abuse to protect the victim. Don't do your own investigation when it comes to child abuse. You do not need proof that the abuse is actually happening. Don't confront the abuser. Report it to leadership. Report it to law enforcement or child protection agencies. A whistleblower policy, unlike the duty to report child abuse policy, is intended to cover concerns that fall outside the scope of the duty to report child abuse. The policy therefore includes your concerns about reporting on activity that might be taking place in a venue or a facility that should not be taking place, inappropriate or unsafe facility for events or functions, health and safety risks, including risk to the public, as well as other employee, volunteers, or children and youth. Report damage that could harm the environment. Report illegal activities within the organization or section which may include conduct which is an offense or a breach of a law, the unauthorized use of funds, possible fraud and corruption, misuse of charitable status. Report a personal injury or an injury to a colleague within the organization, which could include a physical injury, harassment of self or others, sexual or physical abuse of other members. Complaints related to harassment or discrimination against an individual will be dealt with also under specific policies and procedures related to those issues. Under the reporting and response of abuse, we would encourage that you have policies for abuse against minors and abuse against vulnerable adults. Report breaches of policy under the whistleblower policy if people have broken code of conduct. Anything that makes you feel uncomfortable in terms of known standards, your experience, or your standards you believe that subscribes to unethical or improper conduct. Concealing information about any of these matters, a breach of code of confidentiality. Every organization should have a code of conduct, and the intent of that is to deal with conduct such as verbal abuse, bullying, physical abuse, discrimination, harassment, policies and actions of how individuals within the organization should act in relation to illicit drugs, alcohol, behavior that would not be befitting of the organization or reflect the code of conduct or the statement of beliefs of the organization. It should be emphasized that the whistleblower policy is intended to assist individuals to raise concerns or report misconduct, providing they disclose in accordance with the policy and that they are not doing it maliciously. The courts in many of our countries will protect individuals under the whistleblower policy so long as it wasn't malicious. It does not mean that the individual will not be subpoenaed to testify in court or deposed. Your whistleblower policy should clearly communicate that the report will be kept confidential and that the identity of the individual that is reporting will be protected. Under a whistleblower policy, you should discourage it from being an anonymous allegation because so often organizations will not take seriously anonymous allegations, but their identity should be protected. Within your whistleblower policy and procedures, it should be identified who the officers will be, that the report will be taken seriously, and it will be reviewed by a committee of officers. Once a whistleblower has made a report, the procedure should outline how quickly they will receive a response, and the policy should provide a timeline for that response. To acknowledge that the complaint has been received, to indicate how the process will be dealt with, to give an estimate of how long it will take to provide a final response to the allegation or the report, to tell you whether any initial inquiries have been made, to supply you with information on staff support mechanisms that are in place, and to tell you whether further investigation will take place, and if not, why it won't take place. Where appropriate, the matters raised may be investigated by next senior manager or by the board, be referred to the police, be referenced to an external investigator or auditor, to be referred to the board of director, or what form the subject of an independent inquiry will take place. In order to protect individuals and those accused of misdeeds or harm, initial inquiries will be made to decide whether or not the investigation is appropriate, and if so, what discipline steps have been taken. It is not necessary to report on the disciplinary steps that have been taken, but rather that the accusation or the report has been made and taken seriously. We would strongly recommend that organizations where there has been a report of either criminal activity or crimes against children or youth or vulnerable adults, that immediate action be taken by suspending an individual before an investigation is actually conducted and the report has been finalized. Temporarily suspend the individual to protect everyone while the investigation is taking place. Do not encourage or do not ask for individuals to first confront the person that they are raising a report against. The amount of contact between the officers considering the issues and you will depend on the severity of the matter. We do encourage that there be clear lines of communication provided. As we come to the end of this podcast today, we would also recommend that within your whistleblower policy, you permit people to bring a colleague or a friend or a representative with them if they do meet with the organization in relationship to their concern or their report, that it be well documented. The organization should accept that they understand that someone has taken great courage and they are demonstrating their care for the organization when they bring concerns to the organization. And too often, organizations are defensive, and none of us like surprises, none of us like bad news, but it is so important that we respect and value those that do raise concerns within the organization, that they do it appropriately, that you've got well-documented policies and procedures. So people do have the confidence and the comfort level to bring forward an allegation or a report or a concern they are demonstrating their duty of care to the organization. If someone is malicious in bringing forward a report, and once an investigation has been done, you can see that it was a malicious report. That's very different from an unsubstantiated report. There is a real difference between an unsubstantiated report and a malicious report. If someone is trying to do harm to the organization or do harm to a coworker or someone within the organization, yes, progressive steps of discipline should be followed. However, in most cases, people bring forward concerns because they are demonstrating their care for the organization. So it's so important you have safe people accepting those reports and processing and investigating those reports and dealing with them swiftly and providing clear communication. It doesn't mean you have to tell a full report and give all the details as to what was found and discovered, but you should provide enough information that that person does feel substantiated, that they do feel that they are being recognized and honored for bringing forward a report to the organization. It is important for organizations to have a whistleblower policy. We encourage you to have one within your organization. We encourage you, if you are the whistleblower, speak up. Have courage. Be willing not to stand on the sidelines, but to raise concerns. Embrace integrity and in ethics and speak the truth. And I'm sure you will be honored in the long run, or that is what my hope is. Have a great day. Thanks so much for joining us for another issue of Plan to Protect with Melodie Bissell. Take care, everyone. See you next week. Bye.